Good morning, everybody in the future at DBC. My name is Regina Vu. I coordinate the Desert Bighorn Sheep Program for California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I'm here to give you an update on the status of Desert Bighorn sheep in California. In California, bighorn sheep management is divided across three programs. In the north, we've got Sierra Nevada Bighorn Sheep Program. In the south, we have here in the Peninsular Ranges, Peninsular Desert Bighorn Sheep near the U.S.-Mexico border. And then we have Desert Bighorn Sheep here in the grayish-brown polygons that are managed as a game species. Both Sierra Nevada Bighorn Sheep and the Peninsular Desert Bighorn Sheep are federally listed as endangered, and they are managed according to their recovery plans with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife as lead agency in their monitoring and recovery efforts. So I'll briefly update you on Peninsular Bighorn Sheep recovery and then get into the unlisted Desert Bighorn Sheep program. Peninsular Bighorn Sheep are federally listed as an endangered species. The population is divided into 9 recovery regions, with the northernmost 3 being adjacent to very densely populated city centers. And oftentimes that having a large population near bighorn sheep can lead to conflict. For example, there are sheep eating my flowers, or there are sheep eating the oleander on golf courses and such. In the Peninsular Ranges, we do have active disease and a persistent low lamb recruitment, below 30% across the recovery regions. And we attribute that poor lamb survival to pneumonia. And we also know that low recruitment is a significant obstacle to population recovery. Please forgive the blurry image here, but this is just a snippet from the 2018-19 annual report from Peninsular Bighorn Sheep Recovery Program. You'll see here range-wide Peninsular Bighorn sheep population estimates from 1994 to 2016 in a positive trend. CDFW did not conduct helicopter surveys in 2012, 2014, and 2018 due either to a lack of helicopter contract or funding. Estimates were derived here by summing estimates for each of the recovery regions. At the time of publication of this report, we had anticipated doing a helicopter survey in fall of 2020. However, that was canceled due to reasons mentioned just now, but also due to COVID concerns. The population did seem to be trending upward, and when looking at recovery of an endangered species, the importance of regular surveys cannot be overstated, especially when we're balancing low recruitment rates. Aside from low lamb recruitment, administrative difficulties, Peninsular Bighorn Sheep Program, Peninsular Bighorn Sheep, I should say, also have to deal with some physical barriers to their recovery. In May of 2020, construction of a bollard fence began through the Jacumba U home range. It was deemed an emergency and began very quickly. A paved road for construction cut right through key movement corridors and core lamb rearing habitat. Fortunately for the Jacumba U group, activities were halted post-November 2020, but not before a good portion of the fence was built. Now the western third of the fence has not been built, and bighorn sheep can still move across the border. CDFW has asked for mitigation or removal of parts of those fences so that the bighorn sheep can continue to use the range, their home range there. In order to downlist Peninsular Bighorn sheep, 3 criteria need to be met. The first is at least 25 ewes per recovery region. The second being a population of at least 750 individuals and a stable or increasing population trend. And lastly, some type of regulatory mechanisms for land management, essentially commitments for long-term protection of Peninsular Bighorn sheep habitat. So say they are downlisted and they no longer have a federal protection, we'll still need to make sure that their habitat is protected for their long-term persistence on the landscape. 2016 population estimates were very promising. Population was at or above 750. We had an average of 25 ewes per recovery unit. So those are really promising numbers. And like I mentioned earlier, regular surveys just cannot be understated when we're cautiously optimistic about recovery of an endangered species. So hopefully there will be more regular monitoring of PBS very soon. So now that we've gotten Peninsular Bighorn sheep, gotten you updated there, we'll go over to our desert bighorn sheep, our unlisted desert bighorn sheep. They are fully protected in California with a few exceptions, which is where we designate hunt zones. But for desert bighorn sheep in California, we have approximately 65 populations across mostly southeastern California. So this is an old slide from my 2019 presentation, but I think it really helps put it into perspective how much work we've done and how much more we have to go. In 2010, CDFW halted all air operations, and it wasn't really until 2015 that we got back into regular monitoring by helicopter. In 2016, the Desert Sheep Program hired a 3/4 time biologist, and in 2017, Paige was hired on full time. And since then, we've been able to do fairly consistent surveys touching most of our population so far, but we have about 65 or so populations, and many of them are getting covered. So here's just an example of what we've been able to bring up to date in those last 5 years, and in this last 6th year, we've updated. I've thrown some green stars on top of that map. Those estimates. Having full-time help really does drive getting the work done. We've ended a data drought that we had from 2010 to 2015. We're anticipating adding more full-time help to the team, and suffice it to say, monitoring 65 populations is a lot of work. In 2019, our flight crew did helicopter surveys across 7 populations and over 8 flight days. They counted 681 desert bighorn sheep. You'll see that the resting spring range was kind of a bit of an exploratory flight. You also notice the Newberry-Rodman-Ord Mountains has a pretty solid population, and is actually one of our newest hunt zones. For this fall, we are remaining optimistic that we will get a helicopter survey contract and that funding will align, and we'll report back to you on that in 2023. So 2020 was an odd year, I think, for many, and maybe for California especially, given COVID or pandemic concerns, as well as one of our biggest wildfire years for California. We were able to pull off some COVID base camp operations with the skeleton crew. So here's a summary of the populations in which we captured. We have kind of a combination of things going on here. Some of these are part of adding additional marks into our populations where we have hunted hunt zones, and then also continuation of disease studies and disease surveillance on the landscape. So over the span of 8 days, we captured in 8 populations 102 animals, and that includes 2 mortalities. So here's a summary of our capture efforts from 2013 to 2020. This is actually more realistically a summary of collars placed, because you'll see that the 2020 number doesn't include those 2 mortalities. When monitoring 65 populations, it's just not possible to collar a small percentage of each of those 65 populations. It may not even be necessary to maintain a small number of marked animals in each of those 65 populations. It depends on, the data we need from each. So what we aim to do is to monitor a select number of populations within each of our larger conservation units, monitor those and use that information as sort of an index to let us know what's going on in that greater area. This allows us to set realistic and achievable monitoring goals and make the best decisions we can with the resources that are available to us. For water management in our desert sheep populations, we still rely heavily upon volunteer efforts to manage water. CDFW helps prioritize actions and navigate planning with land managers. A recent update received by a member of the Society for Conservation of Bighorn Sheep of a laundry list of about 35 drinkers, which is not a comprehensive list of all of our drinkers. About 19 are estimated to be sufficiently filled for this summer. 2 have already had water hauled, which kind of indicates that it's reflective of the little rain we've had this winter, and sheep using water already early this spring. Let's see, and then 4 have water haul scheduled. 5 will likely need water hauled before the summer ends. We'll have to do those as need to basis. 11 of them are currently dry, but most of these are within ranges with redundant water sources, which is helpful and a good strategy. About 6 of those need maintenance. 1 of those just to dispense water. 2 would need new rain mats and other small maintenance duties. And 2 need major rebuilds. 1 for a flash flood that knocked out a drinker, and then another rebuild actually just needs to be evaluated for relocation, see if there's a better area to collect water and provide water for sheep in that range. And all of that to say, well, first of all, to thank our volunteers who carry on those efforts. But to say that, we know that capacity is one of our major challenges in this department. When I reported to you in 2019, the department was undergoing a service-based budgeting exercise. They recently reported those results. They evaluated what our mission needs are and what is actually being fulfilled. And I think it's no surprise to the people who are actually doing the work, but they found that species management and monitoring and habitat conservation is really only operating or meeting about 26% of its mission goal. And not to get too into the weeds on that service-based budgeting report, but the key findings were basically we're operating, at least wildlife management is operating at 26% of its mission level fulfilled. And the largest task that we identified, part of our mission, is detection monitoring. We're hopeful that now that this has been measured and weighed, we'll hopefully have some more resources coming to us to help support these programs. Another challenge to bighorn sheep conservation in California is high-speed rails or barriers to bighorn sheep connectivity. There are plans for several different high-speed rails in California, which have the potential to impact many wildlife species. There's a high-speed rail plan for, like Sacramento to the LA area, which comes down the Central Valley, but one that has the potential to pose a major barrier and threat to bighorn sheep connectivity was a railway that was planned here for Barstow to the Las Vegas area. Currently, I believe that project has kind of been stopped, but things like this have a tendency to pop up again, so we'll be on the lookout for that. We strive to engage in partnerships and collaborative efforts where our conservation and management goals overlap with research. So here are 2 examples of that collaborative research. Dr. Christina Yellow is evaluating how desert bighorn sheep interact with man-made barriers. And we have a whole team of OSU investigators taking a look at how spatial relationships between interconnected desert bighorn sheep populations shape infection risks at different locales. Hunting. In 2019, California approved regulations to require the use of non-lead ammunition for the take of all game, including bighorn sheep. We also opened a new hunt zone, the Newberry, Rodman, and Ord Mountains, in 2019. So here, just one or two photos of really nice rams harvested in the unit. I believe the bottom ram was harvested using a bow. Here's a quick look at hunter harvest in the last 2 years. Last year in the White Mountains, you'll notice it dropped down to about 67% success. Ultimately, 2 hunters were unable to harvest in the White Mountains. It's a short season, about 4 weeks, due to public land closures due to forest fires. Here's a quick look at hunter harvest over the years. Typically has been higher than 80%. There have been a couple years where it's sunk down to 71%. For the most part, most are successful, with a couple exceptions, mostly in the White Mountains where people are hunting at extremely high elevations, and hunters sometimes end up experiencing altitude sickness and are unable to harvest. Since 1987, hunt tags have been able to generate close to $5 million in revenue for the Desert Bighorn program. Pretty good climb. You'll see that here in 2014, 2015, we took a dip. That was due to only having one fundraising tag available for 14 and one fundraising tag for 15, where ordinarily we have up to 3. And lastly, I wanted to say that we are coming into the final stages of completing our management plan for bighorn sheep in California. In fall 2020, we completed an internal review. December 1st, we sent that plan out for peer review. And again, another thanks to the peer reviewers that are in this audience. We are incorporating comments and suggested edits. Our next step is going to be to prepare a draft for public review. The primary focus of this document is conservation and management of bighorn sheep in the Transverse Ranges, Great Basin, Mojave, and Sonoran deserts, but it also includes a summary of ongoing efforts towards conservation and recovery of both Sierra Nevada and Peninsular bighorn sheep. And with that, thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have enjoyed obsessing over recording and re-recording each of the slides. You can contact me at regina.vu@wildlife.ca.gov or ask questions here. Thanks.